India's economy. What is the real story? In this session, we have with us Mr. Arun Myra in conversation with Mr. Rishikesha Krishnan. Arun Myra is a former member of the Planning Commission of India and one of the country's most respected voices on leadership, governance, and organizational transformation. He spent over 2 decades with the Tata Group, followed by leadership roles at Other T. Little in the US before returning to India for his public service. His books including Reimagining India's Economy, The Road to a More Equitable Society, offer deep insights into creating inclusive growth and humane organizations. Talking about a host for this session, Mr. Rishikesha Krishnan. He's a professor of strategy and former director of the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, an authority on innovation and strategy. He has shaped management education and research in India through his teaching, writing, and leadership. His books such as From Jugaad to Systemic Innovation examine how India can strengthen its innovation ecosystem. Widely respected in academia and industry circles, he continues to influence conversations on strategy, innovation, and higher education. Over to the session titled India's Economy, What is the Real Story?
Yeah, good morning. I'm delighted to spend another conversation with Arun. Arun's been an old friend and also a mentor at a distance for a long time, and I'm delighted to be with him here today. So those of you who read the newspaper regularly would be quite familiar with Arun's thought process over recent years, because one of the nice things about him is that he not only writes books, but he also writes several articles highlighting the points that he thinks are important. And this book in a way captures a lot of the themes that he has been speaking about in recent years. So Arun, maybe just at the outset, why did you write this book? Maybe you should just give us a little background on that.
Thank you, Rishi. I wrote this book actually in a way provoked by Gurcharan and the remark that he once again made to me after having said on stage that before 1991 India was in the dark ages. And I grew up in India after partition and learned to work, and whatever management I learned and did was in those dark ages in India. So like in any story, the writer chooses which characters to talk about to write the story, and there's an angle, an ideology that the writer has. Okay, so I felt that for the sake of younger people particularly, who have been, I think, fed this whole myth that before 1991, nothing good was happening in India. And India became free only in 1991. And just to put the point, and Gurcharan, you did say that in 1991, 64 countries followed a pattern of IMF reforms, and India became the second fastest growing country. Who was the fastest? China. Before 1991, India and China were equally poor. In fact, China was slightly poorer per capita than we were. But look where we are today. So we have to re-examine our ideologies and question some of the myths that have been propagated. So I felt the urge, but then I didn't want to argue it intellectually, which I'm doing in my articles and have done in a previous book. I said, look, let me write the story of how a young Indian experienced those years. And a young Indian who was engaged in these very issues of building a new India, of learning something new himself, enabling others to do things which people felt India was not capable of. So that was my urge to write the book.
So Arun, you're quite critical of contemporary economics and the way it's used or interpreted to shape policy. What is your main objection to the economic thought process that many countries follow?
Well, I first will tell you the sort of intellectual criticism and then come to the matter of a paradigm. Intellectual criticism is this, and again in the previous session you did hear quite rightly, that the Romans found that they were sending gold to India Why? Because India had the industries that produced useful things. Industries means including agriculture, plantation, industries. That's why they did it. But then what happened in history after that? Yes? The Europeans, and the British in particular, who colonized us, they built the industries and used us as a place to get the raw materials for. And what has happened, I could just be not provocative but accurate, that what has happened since 1991, where China has grown, like I've said, well, there is trade. Our largest trading partners are China and the United States. The pattern of trade with the United States is we are a surplus country in exports, which is bothering Mr. Trump. But look at the other side. We import much more from China and export very little. A country who, as I said, in 1991, actually an industry like the industry I was with, which was a commercial vehicle industry, we were far superior. We were in 1991 and before that exporting our vehicles to 55, 60 countries around the world in competition with the Europeans and the Americans and the Japanese. China wasn't doing that then. What has happened? Why are we importing hardware, capital goods, machinery from China and celebrating that we are selling software to the United States using hardware which even the United States is using today? So this is the story of how, as our present External Affairs Minister told the National Security Council, Advisory Council, and I being a member of Planning Commission for Industry, he insisted I be present there so he could say to the rest what he felt I believed in also. He said, we lost the plot in 1991. And that is why we are in this strategic dilemma today that we daren't annoy either the United States or China.
So, one of the paradigms you have been emphasizing in your earlier writing as well as in this book is the importance of system thinking. And you've been quite eloquent about how we don't really view a lot of our economic and social problems as system problems. So, would you kind of maybe just for the benefit of the audience, give us a very short, brief sort of summary of how would a systems view of, say, the Indian economy be different from the way we look at the economy today in general?
Economics doesn't consider the whole system. It considers only those things which, as it says, are important in its mind for the economy and things that you can measure in money terms so the accounting can be kept. So things like the natural environment, the value of it is gauged only by the value to an economic enterprise. So look at a forest which is a rich ecosystem with many different types of timber and vegetation, resources to society. But we want to use them as resources for the measured economy. And we say there are not enough Indian women in the workforce. So what is work? I mean, here in Karnataka, I'm sure it's equally true as elsewhere in this country, that other than the very, very rich women who can employ other people, the other women, whether they go out of the house to work or they work around the house, they wake up before the men and the children and they go to sleep last. So are they not working? Yes, we don't value it in money terms. It's got a great social value. So my problem with economics is it's a non-systemic science in this sense that it doesn't consider the whole system. The system is society, the system is nature, and there's something which you would call the economy also, which is there. What has happened in modern economics, we are destroying the natural system and destroying the social system to find resources to inject for economic growth. Economic growth. So the measure of the goodness of a society, of a system, is how much GDP it has. Well, the GDP is a money measure of activities which are measurable in money and considered useful for growing the economy. So this is the fundamental thing. So I say, like Einstein said, that if you're trying to solve big intractable problems that you're having, and using the same thinking that has caused the problem, you better get your head examined. So today, I'm being provocative. I have been experiencing since my time in the Planning Commission And it was at the request of Dr. Manmohan Singh. I said, sir, you invited me to join the planning commission? That's supposed to be economists and economics, or people who have been in senior positions in the government and know how government system works. And I've been neither. He said, that's why you must join. Because we are stuck in believing that our economists, and he said, I'm considered amongst the best of global leaders, and we have the finest economists. In fact, they go rise to highest positions in universities abroad and in IMF and World Bank, and we bring them here also. So we've got no shortage of economists. On the contrary, we have an excess of them. So talking about the China story, when I joined the Planning Commission, I said, well, let's learning. Look, why do we stop ourselves from learning, benchmarking? If China has achieved more than we had the same aspirations to have less poverty, to be stronger and able to be withstanding, well, leave alone British bullies, American bullies. We should be able to do it as they have done. How come China has become this? And so I asked the World Bank that they continue to take your advice more than we, and you say there are more World Bank people stationed advising the National Development Council than us. But I'm giving you the lens, I said. They have learned much faster than we have how to manage a complex system, which is a society, which is an economy, manage a complex system better than we have. So the World Bank did it, and they came back and they showed us many things that happen inside China which enable organizations to learn, which enable people on the work to develop better skills, which are enabling the policymakers to be able to steer the Chinese economy, like Deng Xiaoping said, feeling the stones underfoot as you cross a turbulent stream, learning in practical reality, not counting the numbers and arriving at big data solutions.
So Arun, if we don't focus on GDP, what are the measures we should be focusing on?
Well, in the system, I would say there are condition variables. One is the economy, let's say, which is measured into GDP. The other is society, the quality and shape of the society. The third is the quality and shape of the natural environment within which society and the economy operate and exist. So these three. But it's a matter of change. So how, again, using the Einstein example, how you go about improving the system is itself a variable which can affect the condition of the system. So governance. And then when you come to governance, you say, what would be good governance? And this comes to your system thinking point. If you're contributing or wish to contribute or to lead the governance of a complex system like a national society with its economy and its environment is, right, you have to listen to people who know each of the other subjects. They know it by their experience, maybe by their own different sciences. And so the way governance is being done, is it likely to result in the improvement of the system or not? And this is what the World Bank came back with the examples. The way the Chinese have continued to govern the system is a lot of listening to local people and to so. The Communist Party knows that if they do not satisfy their people's aspirations, there will be another revolution, and they're used to it and they're fearful of it. Yes, we felt that the experts know best. And look, in 1947 and after that, it's not we adopted a Soviet model. The model of building big industrialization is a Western model. In fact, the Soviets learned it from the West. We just got that. Yes. So the flaw was not adopting Gandhian model. The Gandhian model was each community must listen to others in the community and respect and listen to its own streams, its own forests, and govern the system. Not economists at the top saying this is good for the economy, and then you do find people on the social side in India, the activists saying, but it's damaging society, or the environmentalists even more loudly. These experts quarreling up there is not a systemic way of governing something. Yeah, they're all in their silos, all specialized.
Arun, how do you bring that kind of thought process into the governance system? You were in the planning commission, and I know while you were there, you did try to bring concepts like systems thinking and learning into the plan preparation process. But if you look at the wider policy and governance system in India, how would you bring those ideas into that system?
Um, there are 17, I'm going to link it to the global problem. SDGs. There are 17 SDGs. Talked of measurement also. It was realized that the time when we wrote the SDGs, the world wrote the SDGs, that you better not try to get one index. There are 17 important things. I mean, politically they became 17, or intellectually at that time 17 things. But it said that all 17 must improve. You cannot just expect the economic and the livelihood sides to improve without the public health, public education, and so on to improve. It said all 17 must improve. Now, if there are 17 variables, and they exist all over the world, yeah, you can say that, well, amongst the SDGs, there's something to do with the quality of the oceans. And many countries may have no ocean near to them, or some countries, no ocean. So it's possible that all 17 do not apply to every part of the world. I'm going to just put an extreme in saying I'm sure that 7 of those matters in the SDG apply in Boulder, Colorado, and in Kerala, and in Ladakh, and wherever else you will. Now, if there's 7, and now I'm a scientific mathematician, if there's 7 variables out of a choice of 17, how many combinations can there be? 94 million. So there are 94 million different ways in which this complex system exists. And if you have to change anything, you have to start from where it is. So when you talk about measuring the quality of the system, you have to allow each system part to measure itself, and you then share and assess with them that they confirm it, and then their journey must start from there about how they're going to make the thing. So one-size policy solutions will not fit everywhere. And this is the world's problem today. So I come to local system solutions developed and implemented by communities with the support of the others, not told to, guided to, funded by the others. And this we realized was the problem of the Planning Commission, that we were providing or telling the ministries to provide funds for particular things which we felt were most important in the whole country. I would say Mr. Modi did abolish the Planning Commission because the Planning Commission failed to implement its own reforms, which is what Manmohan Singh had asked us to do. And we got what they were. And he then, a few months later, put out a charter for a Niti Aayog, which if you read it, it says just this. It's local solutions, local governance, a very Gandhian idea, right? And that the rest of us must learn how to support and encourage those. But yes, Niti Aayog has failed to do that because it's still same economists. Same economists.
Okay, but I have a last question for you before we open it up to the audience. And that is, how do we bring these concepts that you underline into the education process? I mean, we have some students here, I know I see several of my both former and present colleagues here from IIM. So there's a lot of interest in how we should, get these concepts into the foundations of what we teach. How would you go about that?
The world is evolving and is evolving at the moment very rapidly. And some people say that, VUCA, well, it is volatility, uncertainty, complexity. I don't know what the A is. And different things, everything all together. A book being launched in Delhi today. Many things are happening together, and we cannot predict even for a few months what the situation is going to be. So in this sort of situation, to have people prepare themselves with a skill for an industry which you hope will be existing, or a job which you hope will be there at that time, is just the wrong thing. Our whole education system has become a vocational system. It's not an education. Now, the real education is learning how to learn. Learning how to, as I say, sense a whole system around yourself, understand your present incapacities and requirements, and then find a path to build your own capacities. So nations develop, like I said earlier, when the people in the nation learn to do things that they did not know how to do before. When the enterprise managers in those nations who employ these people learn how to manage in ways that they did not know before. And when the policymakers in the nation learn how to guide this complex system with all this learning going on and to go forward in that fashion. So we must change our education system to make people become better learners, more inquisitive, more curious, more systems thinkers, and place themselves very humbly in that reality. And Rishi, management, I think management schools, it's a vocational school. Management school is a vocational school. It develops people for the vocation of being a manager, a manager. And the vocation of management is the one I'm questioning. Do people know how to manage a complex system or not? Okay, so we get into the management schools, Rishi, and we've had good discussions or so. The brightest people go into management school and they learn what? A skill which they believe I must have, whether it's finance in this sort of industry or technology and maybe generally or some industry. And at the end of it, that industry is not there, going away. So here we are in India, we have the highest unemployment amongst the higher graduates and the least unemployment amongst unskilled people. And you know something? The Economist has put out that it's the same situation in the United States. Graduates of higher education in the United States are more employed and for longer than people without skills or without, beyond a school education. That's the situation.
Sure, thank you. So I urge you to read his book. There's some particularly interesting examples of how organizations developed learning capabilities. I particularly like the story about telco, where Mr. Maira worked in the early part of his career. And many of you might know that when the Japanese light commercial vehicle manufacturers came into India, there was a fear that the Indian commercial vehicle industry would not be able to respond. But surprisingly to many, but perhaps not so surprising to Telco or Tata Motors, as it is called now, Telco was able to respond with the Tata 407, which became a kind of iconic light commercial vehicle in the Indian market. By the way, variants of the Tata 407 are on the road even today. And that vehicle, which was developed in-house by Telco with its own capabilities, actually managed to compete perfectly well with the Japanese LCV makers, so much so that most of them finally exited the market. So there's some really wonderful stories, a little bit from history, but which talk about, how Indian organizations did develop learning capabilities. So I urge you to read his book. And now the floor is open for anyone who has any questions. Gurcharan, yes, first question is to you.
Yeah, what I was saying, I just felt I should issue a correction. I do not believe the period before 1991 was a dark age. I think I'm in fact an admirer of Mr. Nehru, and I think he gave us democratic institutions and robust democratic institutions. And so I think we had all kinds of freedom, but we were denied economic freedom. And I'll just give you one example. You worked during the period of the license Raj. I'll give you one example. In my case, I ran a company that had a product called Vicks VapoRub. And that one year, there was a flu in the country, and we sold hell of a lot of Vicks VapoRub. Now, our license said that we could produce only so many tons of Vicks VapoRub. And if we exceeded that, we were breaking the law. And not only were we breaking the law, but there was a 2-year jail sentence at the discretion of the government, of course, that a person could actually go to jail. And so I was summoned to Delhi. I was at the head of the company. And I was told by the joint secretary that they were going to make an example of our company, especially because we were a multinational company. And he reminded me that multinationals, look what the last multinational East India Company did to us. And he told me that you chaps in the private, I think he was probably a Marxist. He said, you chaps in the private sector are all crooks. And we want to tell people that you must obey our laws. And so I was facing, at that point, 2 years in jail. This is a license permit Raj. Arun, that I am talking
I want to
about.
talk about the
Yeah,
public.
so I think
budget.
that's
the question. Your question was.
Gurcharan,
Anyway.
sorry,
Yes, yes,
I think let's
yes,
not
yes,
get into
yeah,
a debate
yeah,
on the license
yes,
permit, Raj,
yes,
now.
yes.
So let's open up to anyone else. If you are particularly students, and Ranga, I'll come to you in a minute. I'll just give an opportunity to any of the younger folks if they have any question, and then I'll come to you. Anyone at the back? Any question for Arun? Okay, fine. Ranga, the floor is yours, please. Yeah.
You contrasted India and China. We have been following heights of public sector which have failed us. But and the Western knowledge tells us that public sector is per se failure concept because of lack of controls and so on, conflict of interest. But China has made a success of its public sector. What is the secret, I wonder?
Thank you. So this is the way I think we should tackle things. If something has worked when you're not expected to work because public sector is not supposed to work, we should find out what actually was happening and why it worked. Okay, a public sector undertaking is supposed to be for the public. You must measure its success by the outcomes it produces for the public. A private bank, its primary measure, HDFC Bank, is how much shareholder value it has created. We contrast it with State Bank of India. And what we would say, yes, that HDFC uses capital more effectively and returns to the market much more capital, and State Bank doesn't do. But if you were to say that which of these two banks has produced more, for the common people, a chance for them to participate in the economy, the common people. This study has been done. There's no question that the State Bank has done more than the best HDFC Bank because the measure is different. You don't expect the HDFC person to actually take care of the social needs. So that, of course, reduces the margin that goes back into the investor, but is producing goodness for the people. So the scorecard question, as you said, in China, at the whole economy stage, as I said, GDP goes on. But what goes behind the scene, we don't even want to know because we want to know what are they doing about GDP. And this is what when we found in the planning commission, I've been reading about China written by not just Chinese own economists, but the Western economists who have been studying China for a long time and said, thank goodness we got the opportunity to tell people how China really did it. And you're right. Keeping the public sector, giving it a role in the financial services industry, trading industries, because that is where the prices and money to people is.
Let's take one last question. Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Arun, this is a follow-up of a question I asked you many, many years back. If you're looking at startups that are trying to disrupt the economy, we've talked about systems change and listening to the ground up. We have a revolution coming in terms of AI, right? And there is a significant disruption that is going to be happening because of that. How do the people who today don't have a voice, but have the abilities, step in and create some systems change?
Startups. Yeah. Don't be a job seeker, be a job creator, stand up, startup. Our measure of success of the startup economy in India is the number of unicorns. What does a unicorn produce and for whom? The measure itself is how much produces wealth for the investors and the venture capitalists and the stock market. Are we measuring our unicorns by how much goodness they produce and opportunity for the people? And this is where, yes, Seeker Prahlad and yourself, when you said profit at the bottom of the pyramid, there's where CK and I had a very interesting ideological disagreement. I said the profit at the bottom of the pyramid produced by Hindustan Lever selling shampoo in small sachets, the profit went who? To some investor somewhere else. It was not profit that was in the bottom of the pyramid. It was extracted from the bottom of the pyramid. So our unicorns are extracting, if I might say, something, and it's converted into stock market wealth. So get the measures right about what is real entrepreneurship and real innovation.
So please read Arun's book. Thank you, Arun.
Systems in society focusing beyond the GDP, quoting from the Chinese and the Soviet models. I'm sure this session,
Not the Soviet model, please.
the Western model, if I should correct.
Western model and the Chinese model. The Soviets followed the Western model in terms of big industries and did not pay attention to building the bottom and the cooperatives which China has done. And just it's important to say that because Gandhiji said the same. His criticism of the West and of China, of the Soviet Union was the profit goes up to somebody on the top. In one case, it's the state, and the other case, it's a private owner.
Well, thank you so much for correcting me, sir, there. I'm pretty sure that this session definitely explored the realities that we were looking for. And thank you once again for sharing your experiences and insights with this young crowd right here. With that being said, let me take this moment to please invite Ms. Malavika Harita, who is a mentor for startups and women entrepreneurs. She's also a communication evangelist. Please to join me right here on this dais to present a token of appreciation for our speaker and the host. Can we please have a huge round of applause? Taking this moment to thank our gifting partners for the 11th edition of Bangalore Business Literature Festival. Thank you, indeed, an engaging session that I must say.